Okay, today we are going to learn how to do layers in On1 Photo Raw. Hold on one second. Yep. In week one, we learned how to place stacks of effects on top of a photo. In week two, we learned how to use masks to erase portions of those effects so that they applied only to portions of a photo. Today, we're going to use those very same masking effects, masking techniques, but instead of using effects, we're going to use photographs, one on top of another. And then using the very same masking techniques that you learned in week two, we're going to mask out portions of the top photo to reveal portions of the bottom photo. That's layering. For instance, we can mask out a sky on the top layer to reveal a different sky that's sitting on the photo layer below it. Just for your information, high dynamic range, where you have 3 or more different exposures and you blend those 3 so that you get the best exposure of all the light areas and dark areas, that's layering. Focus stacking, where you've taken different focal lengths to get the near things in focus, the far things in focus, and then blend those photos so that everything is in focus. That's layers. I'll walk you through 4 different layer projects using the masking techniques that you already know. Anytime you have a question, please unmute yourself and interrupt me. Buckle up, it's going to be a fun ride. Okay, we are now on the browse section of On1. The first layering project, I'm going to start with this rose. This rose looks familiar. Why does this rose look familiar? It's the rose that we used in the second session, except the rose was on a bed of leaves. Well, that photo was created in layers, and I'm going to show you how that was created. On the right-hand side, above tone and color, you'll see a section that says layers. If I click on the word layers, it compresses that section. And if I click on it again, it displays the entire section. The first thing that you ought to do when doing layers is to rename each of the photos so that you remember exactly what that layer is. So I'm going to double click on this name. It doesn't rename it. It doesn't change the file name. It's only while you're working on it in On1, so it's perfectly safe. So I am going to call this Rose. Now, in order to put a second photo on top of the first photo, we don't go back to browse, because if you go back to browse, it's going to eliminate this photo and it's just going to bring in another single photo. What we want to do is add a photo on top of this photo. And in order to do that, you go to the little plus sign that's right here. If I put my mouse over it, see it says add layer. If I click on the plus, a little dialog box comes up that says you're going to do a layer. And I say, yes, I know. I press the plus. If you don't want to see this dialog box anymore, you can check the box right here. So I click on add layer, and I'm back into my browse module. And here's the bed of leaves that I want to use. So I can either double click on this, or I can click on it once and come down on the bottom right. It says add as layer. I click on that. And now I've just put the bed of leaves on top of the rose. Here's the bed of leaves. and it's on top of the rows. And I am going to just call this leaves. Now the leaves are on top of the rows. I know the rose is there. How do I see the rose? Well, there's a few ways to do this. The first way is to punch a hole through these leaves, sort of like making a donut hole in a donut, by masking out the center of the leaves. So if I select mask, I have my mask brush, I am painting out, and I am at opacity 100%, and I am on the leaves layer. Always remember what layer you are on. Just like when we had stacks of effects, if you wanted to change an effect, you had to make sure you were in the correct effect. If you want to adjust a layer, you have to make sure you are on the layer you want to adjust. So we're on leaves, and we know the rose is here somewhere. So if I paint out, there's the rose underneath the leaves. Now I can keep making this hole bigger and bigger. The problem is I really can't see where the edge of the rose is. So at some point I'm going to spill over, and it's going to be a messy mask. How can I see where the edge of the rose is? You may remember from session 2 that we talked about adjusting the opacity of effects. If we reduce the opacity of an effect, it made the effect more transparent, and then we saw less of the effect on the photo. Well, you can do the same thing with the photos themselves. If we come over to the right-hand side, we see that we have selected the leaves layer, and we have an opacity slider. And if I slide this slider down, it makes the leaves more and more transparent. I could go all the way to 0, in which case the leaves are totally transparent. We're still on the leaves layer, but we've just changed the opacity of the leaves layer. So if I go somewhere in the middle here, not only do I still see the leaves, but I also see the edges of the rose. So now if I continue to do my masking, I can now go to the edge of the rose, pretty close to the edge of the rose, without spilling over into the leaves. And if I continue all the way around, getting close to the edge without going onto the leaves, and now if I put my opacity on my leaves back to full, there's the rose on top of the leaves. It's not really the rose on top of the leaves. Remember how we created this. The rose is actually underneath the leaves, but we are seeing the rose because we punched a hole through the leaves by masking out the center section of the leaves. Any questions about what we just did?
I have a question.
Yes.
When you selected the leaves, the leaves, you had selected the leaves first. You said don't go to browse, but then you went to the plus sign, which was going to add another layer. And it gave you a selection of photos up there. What if you want to go back to your whole gallery to see all your photos in order to pick it out? You only had about 5 up there. Right.
I put the photos into the same browse subdirectories just so that it was easy to get to. Let me show you. If I hit plus, it's going to bring me back there. I can go all the way back to whatever subdirectory I want. Let's say I want to go to my C directory. If I click this, I would get a set of boxes showing everything in that hard drive. I could then select a different subdirectory and then a different subdirectory under that until I found the photo that I wanted to use. But you have full run of everything that's on your hard drive. when you want to add a layer.
So it's advantageous to create that other browse box, a browse subdirectory in order to.
If you want to do layers, it's helpful to put whatever photos you want to work on into the same subdirectory, just so that it's easier to reach each time you go to the plus sign.
Okay.
It's just easier rather than, you know, hitting the plus sign and then having to search through everything on your hard drive to find that other photo again. And if you want a third photo, you got to do it all over again.
Okay.
All right. So a little bit of planning ahead of time helps.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Any question about the technique that we just used?
Yes. I assume you're not quite finished with the detail work.
Correct. We are not.
I was going to ask you, Jay, what other tools on the masking would you use to try to pull the rows up rather than the way you did it?
This is not my favorite technique for this particular combination. I'm going to show you another way of doing it that gives you a better result. All right, so hold on just a minute. Okay, now we're back to, we started with the rows and we then hit the plus sign and we selected the leaves. Leaves are on top. Another way of making the same photo is to have the rows on the top and then erase around the rows everything that we want to be masked, so that the leaves that are now sitting below the rows show through around the rows. So that's what we're going to do now. Can we flip the way the stack is organized? No problem at all. All we have to do is grab whichever photo we want to move. Let's say we want to grab the leaves. I hold down the left mouse button, and as I drag it down, you'll see a white line just appeared below the rows. If I let go, the rose is now on the top, the leaves are now on the bottom. I could have done the flip side. I could have grabbed the rose and dragged it above the leaves, and as soon as the white line appeared, if I let go, I'd get the same result. You can drag down, you can drag up, but you can change the order of the stack. Now I've got the rows on the top. Now I've got a different challenge. Instead of painting in the middle in order to show the rows, I want to paint around the rows in order to show the leaves. I am in mask. I have to make sure I am on the rose level because I am now going to be masking on the rose level. I am masking on the rose level, and if I start to paint out, I am painting out everything that I don't want on the rose level, and now it's revealing the leaves that are below the rose. And if I keep on doing this, eventually I will get a mask around the rose, and the photo again will look like the rose is sitting on the leaves. Still not the easiest way to do this composite, to do this layer. So I am going to go back. And this time, because the rose has very defined edges, I'm going to use my artificial intelligence mask. So I click on my artificial intelligence mask. And if you remember, you paint in red what you wanted to mask and green on what you wanted to keep. So we are going to go around the rows. I like to stay a little close to the rows so that the artificial intelligence really knows what I don't want. And I'm going around the rows. And then I will paint out some of these. And now I will hold down the Alt key, or on an Apple product, the Option key. And now when I paint, I'm getting the green, which is keep. And so I want to keep everything that I am hitting as green, and I paint around the rows. And now I will go up to apply, click on apply, and I've got a damn good mask. The green is what I'm going to keep. The red is what I'm going to mask. And if I've masked this whole area around the rows, it will show the leaves coming through. I hit done. And that's the photo that you worked on in session 2. Any questions? Now, remember, I still don't have a single photo. I still have 2 layers. These are individual photos. The rose is one photo, happens to be sitting on top. The leaves are a completely different photo sitting on the bottom. What if I want to make the leaves darker? Not a problem. Select the leaves layer and then come down to exposure and change the leaves. Notice it does not change the rose at all. It can't change the rose because the rose is a completely different picture. If I want to change something on the rose, I can click on the rose and say I want to put in a special effect on the rose. I want to add the color enhancer to the rose. And I want to increase its saturation. I can increase the saturation of the rose, and it doesn't affect the saturation of the leaves at all because the leaves are a completely different layer. Any questions? Okay. If I now am happy with this photo and I want to save it, as we demonstrated in session 1, what we would do is we would say export. Here's our export dialog box. It's going to put it into the same folder where the rose and the leaves were. And I say export now, and it's going to create a JPEG in that browse folder. No layers, just a JPEG. Now, what happens if I'm not sure that I want to be done, that I don't want to make future adjustments? If you go down to this button here, which says done, it means I am done editing for now. I'll click on the word done. It will take me out of the edit mode and put me back into browse. If I wait a second, there we go. Now you'll notice we have the original rose photo, we have the original leaves photo, but we have 2 combined photos. This one, if you look at the file name, is a JPEG. And if I open this one up, it is a single photo. Layers are gone, adjustments are gone, gone. Go back to browse. This one was created when I hit the button done. You'll notice that it has a different extension called On Photo. If at some future time I want to come back and work on this set of layers again, if I open this one, notice the layers are there, the effect is there on the leaves, the darkening adjustment is there. Everything that I did before has been preserved, and I can now change those adjustments. I could add effects. I could add another layer of a photo and continue to enhance this photo. So by using done, you haven't committed yourself, and you can go back and you can do future adjustments where all of your adjustments up to that point are preserved.
Jay, I assume that the source photos have to stay in the same directory,
No, the source photos could have come from anywhere.
but you have to keep them there in order to be able to come back to the layers? Or does it know where to find the source
It knows-
photos if you move them?
It knows where to find them.
Jay, in Browse, on my system anyway, when you hover the cursor over one of the photos, you might briefly get the full file name of the photo, but it doesn't remain. It seems to go in and out. Is there another way to do that, to get the full file name?
If you click on the photo, the file name ought to appear just below the photo.
But if the file name is long, sometimes it's truncated.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't have an example of that, so yeah, if you put your cursor over it, it appears for a short period of time. That's a function of the program. I'm going to suggest use shorter file names. Right now. When I just
Change the subliminal.
wait. When I put my cursor over this rows, it's a long file name. What it shows on the bottom is the beginning and the end of the file name and eliminates the middle. You see, it says Pix 08 Colonial Park, and then it ends with UN 2017 original. So it's given you as much of the file name as it could in that space, but it doesn't truncate. It hides the middle so that at least you see the beginning and the end of the file name. Any other questions? Okay, we are done with that layer photo. Let's go to the next layer photo. Somebody wanted to know, can I make a transparent layer like the one that Debbie had created using grapes or anything else? So the answer to that is yes. So I'll show you how to do that. Let's start with the bed of leaves. And again, let's name this leaves. And now we are going to add a second layer. And the second layer is a photo of grapes. I double click on that. And there's our photo of grapes sitting over our bed of leaves. I want to mask out everything that is not grapes. I could do it in two ways. The easiest way is going to be to use artificial intelligence on the masking tool, a masking tool. Another way I could have done it is by doing it by color and choosing purple. We showed how to do that in the second session. But I'm going to use the artificial intelligence, and I'm going to mask out everything that is not grapes. And paint around here. And then I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and I am going to paint everything that is grapes so that it will save the grapes. And I did that, and there we go. Okay, and I will hit apply. And I've got a terrific mask where the green is only the grapes. And I say done. And there are the grapes on the leaves. A tool that I haven't shown you up until now, I'll show it to you now. Debbie had mentioned that there's transform in the develop. Here's transform. It does some things. It does keystone, level, or allows you to move the photo. And then you have these adjustments. There's another transform tool up in the upper left-hand corner. And if I click on that, You see it has made a box around the grape photo. Why around the grape photo? Because grape is chosen as the level that we are working on. This transform box allows you to do a couple of unique things. We can, using these tools up here, we can rotate the grapes. We can rotate them a specific number of degrees. We can flip them horizontally or flip them vertically. We can resize it. If I grab the lower left handle and I drag upwards, I can change the size of the grapes. If I grab the middle, I can move around the grapes. The transform tool allows you to do this to any photo that you select. Now, the only thing that we have left to do is to make the grapes translucent. Well, how do we do that? Well, we've already done that when we were working on the rose photo. Remember the opacity slider? The opacity slider allows you to change the transparency of that layer. I have now made the grapes translucent. I can still move the grapes around. I can still do everything that I could do before with the grapes, but now the grapes are somewhat transparent. If I then exported this photo, it would look exactly like this with the grapes semi-transparent. If I wanted to work on this in the future, I would hit done and it would move it to the browse module with all of the layers and adjustments, including the semi-transparency, all intact, and I could work on it again in the future. Any questions on how we did this layer? Okay.
I do have a question. Could you change sort of how narrow, how wide it is, or distort it in any way?
Sure.
The grapes?
Sure. I can make them wider. I can make them narrower. Grab the tool. I could change the size in any direction. Grab the corner here. And like I said, I can change the angle, I can change the rotation, I can change the location, whatever you want.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Jay, I have a question. So let's say you didn't have a picture of grapes that you took someplace. You could go online and just get from some other source, a picture of grapes and put it into your folders?
Yeah, that's how I got these grapes. I got these grapes, I copied them onto the clipboard, I pasted them into one of my graphics programs and just named them grapes. So the answer is yes. How you do that is a different session. Any other questions? Okay, then we will move on. Right, we are back. Let me delete these two. Right. The next layer project we are going to do is Debbie's spring flowers photo. I sent an email saying that I moved this flower from here down to here. Well, technically, I fibbed. I didn't move the flower. I used layers, and I'll show you how. I don't want this flower here. I want this flower down here. And I am going to accomplish that by creating a duplicate photo. I want two layers, one on top of the other, of exactly the same photo. And the way I do that, I don't use the plus sign, which is add a layer, because the easy way to do it, I could hit plus and then click on the flower photo a second time. But the easy way to do it is this second icon, which is duplicate layer. If I click on that, it gives me a second layer on top of the first layer of exactly the same photo. Okay? What I'm going to do, like I did in the first layering project, I am going to reduce the opacity of the top layer. The reason nothing changed on here is that the top layer and the bottom layer are identical. So even if I made the top layer transparent, you wouldn't see any change because you're seeing the bottom layer. I've now selected the bottom layer, and using the transform tool that I just showed you when we were doing the grapes, I'm on the bottom layer, transform tool. I am going to grab that bottom photo using my left mouse button, and I am going to move that bottom layer down. What you see on the screen there is the top layer, semi-transparent. Bottom layer is here. I want to see both layers so that I know where to position this flower. I want to position that flower right there. All right. So now, top layer, bottom layer, top layer, bottom layer. So I have moved the bottom layer so that this flower is now sitting right over here. Now all I have to do is exactly what I did the first time we created the rows on the leaves. I need to punch a hole in the top layer so that you can see the flower that's sitting right here on the bottom layer. So what I am going to do is I am going to reduce the opacity of the top layer. I could reduce the opacity all the way to 0, actually. I am working on the top layer. This is the little bit that is a little bit mind-bending and is one of the more difficult concepts in layers. What you see isn't necessarily what you are working on. What I am seeing is the bottom layer, right? I've made the top layer clear. So I'm working on the top layer, but what I see here is the bottom layer. And so what I am going to do is I am going to click on the mask, and using my mask brush, I am going to reduce the size of my mask brush. I'm going to reduce the feather a little bit. And I am now masking out a section not on the bottom layer, on the top layer at this location. I am now painting out the top layer at this location. I know it's the location I want because I can see the flower that is sitting in that location on the bottom layer. All right. Let's now increase the opacity of the top layer and see what happened. I can now see this flower, which is not part of this photo at all. It's on the bottom layer. If I turn off the top layer, there's the flower. It's on the bottom layer. Any question about what I just did? I punched a hole in the top layer in order to show the flower that I had repositioned on the bottom layer. Now, the next thing that I can do is I can go up to the crop tool in the upper left-hand corner. I grab this handle. I bring this on down to here. I hit apply right over there. And I have now cropped that photo so that the flower on the upper right-hand side that was out on its own is now part of this composition. Now remember, at this point, this is still two separate photos. I've got the top photo and I've got the bottom photo. So if I make any adjustments to the top layer or to the bottom layer, it's not going to affect all the flowers. If I make an adjustment to the top layer, for instance, I change the exposure. Notice it is not changing that photo that's showing through the hole on the bottom layer. Same thing is true if I select the bottom layer. If I change the exposure, it only is affecting the bottom photo and is not affecting the top photo. Is there a way to combine these so that I can continue working in On1 and make adjustments to the entire photo? And the answer to that is yes. You can do it one of two ways. The first way, which is not my favorite way of doing it, if you click on the top photo, there is an icon here that says merge layer. If I click on that, it is going to merge both of these layers. You can see now it is a single photo. And now any of the adjustments I make, any of the effects that I add, is going to affect this entire photo. The problem is that I've lost my layers. What if I want to go back in the future and make adjustments to the layers, such as the exact position of this flower? Maybe I wanted to move it a little bit further down or a little bit more to the right. Once I've merged them, I've lost that ability. So I don't like the merge. So I've undone the merge. What I like to do is the following. If you click on the right mouse button on the top layer, it gives you a pull-down list. And one of the things on the pull-down list is new stamped layer. If I click on new stamped layer, it is going to do exactly the same thing that the merge button did. But it's going to create a third layer on top of the other two layers. It did not destroy the two separate layers. This is a merged layer that sits on top of the other two layers. Now, if I want to change the exposure of the entire photo, everything is changing all at once because it's now acting as a single photo. If I want to change the saturation, I can change the saturation of the entire photo. If I want to do any special effects on the entire photo, I can hit effects and then I can hit add filter and do that. Now, if I save this photo in export, it's going to export it as this JPEG. But if I save this photo under done, I am going to get that extension on photo, and I can go back to this photo with this stack and all of the adjustments to each of the layers. And then if I want to adjust the layers again, all I have to do is eliminate this stacked photo. I hit delete layer, and I'm back to where I was before I did any merging. And I could adjust the top layer, I could adjust the bottom layer. For instance, I could click on the bottom layer, which is this flower, and I click on transform, and I can move that flower around because now I'm only dealing with that layer again. Any questions?
I have a question. Do these files get really, really big and the program really slow when you add layers and layers?
The more memory you're asking the computer to store, the slower your computer is going to get. Yes. Yes. Sometimes if you're working on a complicated photo and you don't have a powerful computer, it might be worthwhile doing it in steps. Go to this step, and then save it as a JPEG, and then put the single JPEG photo in and then make another layer after that and do whatever you want to do, rather than having layer after layer after layer, where it's trying to remember 3, 4, or even more separate photos.
Jay, if you had not wanted to crop and you, for some reason, wanted to keep it bigger,
Yes?
would you have gotten rid of that big flower with artificial intelligence, or
Yes. I would have gotten rid of that flower. Probably I would have, well, let's see if I can even do that. Let me go back. I'll go back a couple of steps and see if I can get to the crop step. Hang on a second. Here we go. Here's the crop step. This is the bottom layer. This is the top layer. What you can do is you could try in here with the retouch tool. Remember, the retouch tool has a perfect eraser. And what you could do is you could try to just as I said 2 weeks ago, the eraser tool in On1 is not nearly as good as the eraser tool, there you go, as the eraser tool in Elements. So probably what I would have done is I would have shifted this back to Elements or opened it in Elements and then used the erasing tools in Elements. But another thing I could have done rather than using this perfect eraser is I could have used the stamp tool, grab part of the trees over here, and then copied them over the flower that was up here. Any one of those 3 ways would work. Does that answer your question?
yes, it does.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, we're going to cancel this. All right, we have done 3 different layering photos. The last one is going to be the most interesting. I am going to take the palm tree shadow. I'm going to put it onto this beach, and then we're going to change the sky. Let's first start by selecting the beach. I take a look at this photo, and my own personal taste, I like the exposure to be slightly brighter. Not a lot brighter, but just slightly brighter. I like a nice bright beach. So I just made the adjustment. Next thing I want to do is I want to put the palm tree shadow on this beach. So I am going to go to add layer. Yes, I am going to add a layer. Here's my palm tree shadow. And I open up my palm tree shadow, and there it is. Now, if I hit transform, it will allow me to move the palm tree shadow. I know I don't want the palm tree shadow to be over the water or in the sky on the beach picture. I'm going to want it somewhere down here. In order to make these things clearer, I will rename these. This is my beach. This one is already named palm tree shadow, so that's good. All right. In order to see where I want to position it, I need to reduce the opacity of my palm tree so that I can see both the palm tree and the shoreline. There's the shoreline, there's the water. I want to put the palm tree right over here. Now I could have, using the handlebars on the side, I could have made the entire palm tree shadow smaller so that I could have fit more of the palm tree shadow onto the beach, but For the purposes that we're doing today, this is good enough. Right? I now can increase the opacity of the palm tree layer. I go to my mask. And now what I am going to do is I am going to mask out on the palm tree shadow layer everything that's not palm tree. So I start here. And I am now erasing everything that is not palm tree. And it is revealing the sand from the beach picture below it. Now, how much masking did I do? I could change the exposure on the palm tree. There's my mask. If I reduce the exposure, I can easily see where I could do a better job. But for the purposes of this session, that's good enough. And especially since it's sand on sand. Now what I want to do is I want to change the exposure of the palm tree layer so that the two layers of sand look pretty much identical. And so I've increased my exposure on the palm tree sand, and now I have the palm tree shadow sitting on the beach as though it was there all along. Next thing I am going to do is I am going to create a stamped layer so that anything I do to this photo now is going to include both the beach and the palm tree. So now if I move this around or if I made it lighter, darker, more saturated, it's going to affect everything. And I don't have to worry about the fact that the palm tree came from a different photo than the beach. Now I'm ready to change the sky. A sky is just another photo that I'm going to layer into this project. Again, add layer, and it brings me back to the browse module. I don't have any sky photos in my own photo bank in this subdirectory. Not a problem. We've been using folders. If I click on extras, these two boxes show up. One is my extras, and this is where you can learn to, when you are outside and you take a photo of a sky and you say, ooh, I want to save that. There are ways to put it into a subdirectory that is my extras. But On1, fortunately, provides you with many, many, many stock photos. So if I click on On1 Extras and I go to Textures, one of the subdirectories is skies. There's metal, monochrome, paper, walls, text, hundreds of different backgrounds, hundreds of different photos. I double click on skies to open that up, and On1 provides sky after sky after sky after sky after sky. When you are changing skies, the most important thing to do is to pick a sky that is compatible with your existing photo. Because if you pick a sky that is very different, it's never going to look natural. You can't pick a sunset if you're in the middle of the day, for instance. This particular sky here probably goes well with our beach photo. So I will click on that, hit add layer, and there's my sky. I know I'm going to want to move my sky so that it is below the horizon. but I know I want it above the top of the photo so that the entire sky is included in the change of skies. The easiest way to add a sky is to put the sky below your old sky. I'm going to grab this sky and I am going to move that layer down one layer below the stamped layer. The sky is now sitting underneath the old sky. If I make the top layer semi-transparent, I can see the sky and I can see my photo. I select sky because I want to move the sky. Here's transform. I am going to move the sky so that I have it in exactly the right position that I think looks best in this photo, right? I can't put the sky up here because then part of the old sky will show at the horizon. And I can't put the sky here because then some of the old sky will show at the top. I can grab these handles and I can change the size of the sky. I can do whatever I want with the sky, but I got to make sure that the new sky covers everything that the old sky covered. And so I am going to put the new sky right there. Select the palm tree shadow, merged file, and now we're back here. The only thing left to do is to get rid of this old sky. And once I get rid of that sky by masking it out, the new sky that's sitting one layer down will show through. So we're going to go to mask. Once again, all of the contours here are rather sharp, so using the artificial intelligence tool ought to work really well. So I will paint what I want to get rid of. And then holding down the Alt key or the Option key, I'm going to paint everything that I want to keep. I will put some green on there so that it is sure I want to keep that hill. Sure, I want to keep this hill. And I want to make sure that it keeps all of that. Then when I hit apply, the top sky is all red, which means it's going to mask it out, and everything else is in green. It's going to keep it. That looks great. I hit done. The old sky is gone, and the new sky that's sitting on the layer right below it has replaced it. If I'm still not happy with the position of the sky, I can always select sky as a layer, go back up to transform, and I could move that sky around if I want. When I'm happy with it, I could say that for my own personal taste, I think that sky isn't light enough. I am on the sky layer. I could change the exposure of the sky. I could make the sky a little bit brighter, like a bright sunny day. And so I could change the colors of my old layers and my new layers so that it looks more natural. Any questions what we've done up until this point? The only set of, yeah.
One
Yes.
thing, you had turned down the exposure of the palm tree so the sand blended with the sand. If you wanted to pop up the darkness of the shadow, would that be in some other effects or
Yeah, I would have done that when I first opened the palm tree before I did the stamped layer. I would have gone into develop, and I would have changed the blacks, and I would have changed the midtones so that the palm tree was the way I wanted it to be. It would have been on one of those earlier steps. Now I can do it now, but it's much more difficult because then I have to mask out just the palm tree in order to make changes to just the palm tree without affecting the water and the sand and the sky and the hills. See, I'm much further down on the process at this point. But you can do it. I mean, I can eliminate this layer, and I can then go back to the palm layer and then create a new stamped layer and then move on if I wasn't happy with the way the palm tree looked in this photo. Any other questions? The last thing I wanted to show you that we haven't gotten to at any of the other masking discussions is a section that is called Refine. I click on Refine. What Refine does is it helps to make the interface between masks look more natural, look more refined. So let me zoom in on a portion, on a small portion of this photo. And then I'll show you the 3 refine tools. The first refine tool up here at the top is called the refine brush. This refine brush is essentially a brush that works with artificial intelligence. Now, we already used the artificial intelligence, so using this brush would be a waste of time. It's not going to improve what we've already done. But let's say, let me undo something here. I am going to mask out. I am going to ruin a little bit of the mask out. I just masked out the new sky. I made a mistake when I was creating the mask. I can use this brush
Still in the mask mode.
I'm sorry? Mask
Still in the mask mode.
in. And that mask brush will basically do an artificial intelligence and allow you to mask back in. If you've used artificial intelligence, you don't need to use this brush. My favorite masking retouch brush is, not retouch, I'm sorry, refine touch, refine tool, is this next one, the chisel mask. The chisel mask allows you to chisel away a couple of pixels. When you are doing masks and you're doing layers, sometimes you find that there is a little bit of a halo around the edge where the 2 layers come together. What the chisel brush allows you to do is to take away a small amount, like scrape away a little bit from that top layer, and it allows you to fine-tune and eliminate things like those halos. Let me zoom in really tight on this hill, and I am going to, the amount is the number of pixels that it's going to eliminate. If I paint with the chisel brush on the top layer, I don't know if you can see, it's dropped that down a little bit. And if I do it again, it's dropped it down a little bit more. If I want to bring it back, you can see it building it back up. 1, 2. That's the chisel brush. So if you have like light halos around the edge of your mask. That will eliminate that and make it look more natural. The last of the 3 refine tools is this guy here, and it's a blur mask tool. And again, like the chisel brush, it's used on the interface in order to blur what might look like a sharp edge. Sharp edges between layers sometimes looks unnatural, but if you blur it a little bit, it winds up looking much more natural. So if I paint, it blurred that edge a little bit. I'll paint it again. Now I'm going to eliminate the blur so that you can see it when I'm restoring it. 1, 2. You might have seen it became crisper and crisper. So if you are concerned that a particular edge is too sharp, you can use this blur tool to soften it up. On any of these tools, if you want to use it on the entire mask, all you have to do is double click up here on one of these tools that you want to use, and it will automatically apply that particular refine tool to the entire mask. So if, for instance, I wanted to apply the chisel to this entire mask, the entire mask that runs along here, over this hill, down here, if I double clicked on this chisel, it would take 11 pixels off of everything on that layer. And that's my session on layers. Here's your chance to ask any questions you have on any of the layered photos that we worked on.
I have a question. So the refine is only for edges, right? For between different masks?
Correct. The refine refines edges along masks. It can refine masks on a single photo when you've got different effects, but it's most useful when refining interfaces between layers.
So Jay, you would have used that also with the rose and the leaves? to
Yes,
crisp that
yes,
up?
yes, I could have done that. Exactly right. If I felt the edge around the rose was too sharp, I could have softened it. If there was a halo around the rose or the mask didn't exactly get it completely, but I don't want to use the brush because that's brute force, I could shave off a couple of pixels here and a couple of pixels there using the chisel refine tool. Yes. Each time you let go of the mouse left button and then press it down again, it applies that refine tool again. So you can do it on the same spot 3 or 4 times if you like. All right, I'm going to stop the share. And I am unmuting everyone.
Loved it.
Are there any questions about anything that we've discussed over the course of the 4 sessions? This is the last session.
No, this has been, it's been wonderful. Now we need to, now what I need to do is sit down and actually try it.
This is going to take days, weeks, months, more of practice. But now you understand what it is, what it can do, and it frankly opens up the possibilities to be virtually limitless.
Thank you, Jay.
Jay,
Yay, very good.